Here's the waitress who stopped a war. If you believe in the power of courage and compassion, please like this video and comment your thoughts below. Your support helps us share more incredible true stories. A waitress made a split-second decision to hide a bleeding biker from his enemies. 24 hours later, 300 motorcycles appeared at her diner's door. What she'd done changed everything, but no one imagined what would come next. Sophie Mitchell had worked at Red's Diner for 8 years, serving coffee and eggs to truckers, travelers, and the occasional local who couldn't sleep. The diner sat on Route 89 outside Prescott, Arizona, a lonely stretch of highway where the desert stretched endlessly under star-filled skies. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Barely. At 32, Sophie was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Single mother to 5-year-old Emma, working double shifts 6 days a week, she lived paycheck to paycheck in a small apartment above the hardware store in town. Emma's father had left before she was born, just disappeared one day, leaving Sophie to figure out parenthood alone. She'd done okay. Emma was healthy, happy, enrolled in kindergarten. They had a roof over their heads and food on the table. That was enough. It had to be enough. The graveyard shift was Sophie's regular, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Friday through Tuesday. She'd take orders, pour coffee, clean tables, and listen to the hum of the highway. Most nights were quiet, peaceful even. Red, the owner, trusted her to handle things alone during those dead hours. She liked the solitude. It was 3:17 a.m. on a Saturday when the door chimed. Sophie looked up from wiping down the counter, expecting a trucker or someone who'd driven too long and needed caffeine. Instead, a man stumbled through the door. Tall, muscular, maybe 40 years old, wearing a leather vest with patches she recognized immediately. Diablo's MC. Motorcycle clubs were common on this stretch of highway. Most were harmless, guys who loved their bikes and their brotherhood, but some were dangerous. The Diablos had a reputation. Tough, territorial, not people you crossed. Sophie had served members before. They tipped well and didn't cause trouble as long as you showed respect. But this man wasn't here for coffee. Blood soaked his left side, dripping onto Red's clean floor. His face was pale, sweating, twisted in pain. He gripped the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Help," he rasped. "Please, they're coming." Sophie's training kicked in. 8 years of dealing with drunks, fights, and medical emergencies in a roadside diner. She rushed around the counter. "You need a hospital. I'm calling 911. "No!" His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "No cops. No ambulance. They'll find me. Please, just let me hide. 5 minutes. Please." Sophie stared into his eyes. Desperate, terrified eyes that reminded her of a cornered animal. Every instinct screamed danger. This man was trouble. Whatever he was involved in, it wasn't her business. The smart thing was to step back, call the police, protect herself. But Sophie had never been particularly smart when someone needed help. "Back room," she said quickly. "Through that door. Storage area. Hide behind the supply shelves. Don't make a sound." He nodded, stumbled toward the door she indicated. Sophie watched him disappear into the storage room, then grabbed towels and frantically wiped up the blood trail he'd left. Her hands shook. What was she doing? This could end badly. This could end very badly. She'd just finished wiping when headlights cut through the darkness outside. 3 motorcycles pulled into the parking lot, loud, aggressive engines. Sophie's stomach dropped. Through the window, she saw their vests. Iron Wolves MC, a different club, a rival club, if the local rumors were true. 3 men entered. Big men, leather-clad, faces hard. The leader had a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His eyes swept the diner, calculating, dangerous. "Evening," Sophie said, keeping her voice steady. "Coffee?" "We're looking for someone," Scarface said, ignoring her offer. "Man on a bike. Diablo's patch. Came through here maybe 5-10 minutes ago. You seen him?" Sophie met his eyes. Lying to men like this was dangerous. But so was betraying someone who'd begged for help. She made her choice in a heartbeat. "Haven't seen anyone but truckers tonight. Pretty quiet." Scarface studied her face, looking for tells. Sophie had waitressed long enough to maintain neutral expressions through harassment, propositions, and threats. She didn't flinch. "You sure about that?" Another wolf stepped forward. "Because his bike's not far from here and he's bleeding pretty bad. We just want to talk to him. Like I said, haven't seen him. Maybe he went into the desert. People do that sometimes, think they can cut across to the highway." The third wolf was already looking around, checking the bathrooms, peering into the kitchen. Sophie's heart hammered. If they found the storage room, if they found him, place is empty, the third wolf reported. Scarface stared at Sophie for another long moment. Then he pulled out a card, dropped it on the counter. He shows up, you call that number. There's money in it for you. Good money. I'll keep that in mind, Sophie said, not touching the card. The wolves left, engines roaring as they pulled back onto the highway. Sophie waited until their taillights disappeared completely before rushing to the storage room. The man, she still didn't know his name, sat slumped against the wall, barely conscious. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. He needed real medical attention. They're gone, Sophie whispered. But you need a hospital. You're hurt bad. Can't, he mumbled. They'll check hospitals. They'll find me. Then you'll die. Rather die than let them catch me. His eyes focused on her face. Why'd you help me? You don't know me. You asked for help. I said yes, that's all. Sophie grabbed the first aid kit Red kept for kitchen accidents. I'm going to try to stop the bleeding. This might hurt. Already hurts. He managed a weak smile. I'm Jake Morrison. Sophie Mitchell. And Jake? You owe me one hell of an explanation after this. Two. Sophie worked on Jake's wound with shaking hands and basic first aid knowledge. The cut was deep, looked like a knife wound, but it had missed major arteries. She cleaned it as best she could, used butterfly bandages to close it, wrapped it tight with gauze. You need antibiotics, Sophie said, and probably stitches. This is temporary. It'll hold, Jake said, though his pale face suggested otherwise. Thank you, seriously. You just saved my life. Why are they after you? Jake was quiet for a moment, deciding how much to tell her. My club, the Diablos, we've had beef with the Iron Wolves for years. Territory disputes, respect issues, the usual. But recently it got worse. Someone's been running drugs through our territory without permission. We thought it was the wolves. Turns out it's more complicated. Complicated how? Complicated like cops are involved. Like the wolves are working with law enforcement to frame us for their operation. I found proof, documents, recordings. I was on my way to meet my brother, show him what I had. The wolves jumped me at a gas station, tried to take the evidence and kill me. I got away, but not before they cut me pretty good. Sophie processed this. Dirty cops, rival gangs, evidence of crimes. She'd stepped into something way beyond a simple fight between bikers. Where's the evidence now? Jake pulled a USB drive from his vest pocket. Right here. Everything's on this. Financial records showing payments from cartel to local sheriff's department. Photos of meetings between wolves and cops. Enough to bring down their whole operation. Then give it to the FBI or state police and trust that someone higher up isn't dirty too? No thanks. I need to get this to my brother first. Marcus is president of our chapter. He'll know what to do with it. Can you call him? They destroyed my phone, and I can't risk using yours. They might be monitoring local cell towers. Jake tried to stand, grimaced, sat back down. I need a few hours. Let my body recover. Then I'll move. Sophie looked at this stranger she'd hidden, patched up, and lied for. She should tell him to leave. Should distance herself from whatever dangerous situation he was in. Should protect herself and Emma. You can rest here until my shift ends at 7, Sophie heard herself say. There's a couch in Red's office. It's not comfortable, but it's hidden. After 7, you need to go. Deal? Deal? And Sophie, I owe you. My club takes debt seriously. You need anything, ever, you call me. I just need you to not die in my storage room and get me fired, Sophie said, managing a weak smile. She helped Jake to Red's office, got him settled on the ancient couch, then returned to her shift. The rest of the night passed in anxious watchfulness. Every set of headlights made her tense. Every customer made her wonder if they were wolves in disguise. At 6:45 a.m., Red arrived to prep for the breakfast rush. He was 65, ex-military, had owned the diner for 30 years. He knew Sophie was reliable and trusted her completely. How was the night? Red asked, tying on his apron. Quiet, Sophie lied, the word tasting sour. Just the usual. At 7:03 a.m., Jake emerged from the office looking slightly better. Still pale, still hurt, but able to move. Sophie had made him coffee and a breakfast sandwich. He accepted them gratefully. I need to call my brother, Jake said quietly. Can I use the diner phone? Just long enough to tell him where to meet me? Sophie glanced at Red, who was busy in the kitchen. She nodded and showed Jake to the phone by the register. He dialed, spoke in low tones, hung up quickly. He's sending someone to pick me up. 30 minutes. Jake looked at Sophie with genuine gratitude. I won't forget this. I promise. A beat-up pickup truck arrived exactly 30 minutes later. A younger man, early 20s, Diablo's vest, helped Jake to the vehicle. Before climbing in, Jake turned back to Sophie. "My brother's gonna want to meet you, thank you proper. Can I give him your number?" Sophie hesitated. Getting more involved with a motorcycle club seemed unwise, but she'd already crossed that line when she hid Jake from the wolves. "Okay," she said quietly, and wrote her number on a napkin. Jake took it carefully, like it was precious. "You're good people, Sophie Mitchell. World needs more of you." Then he was gone, the truck disappearing down the highway. Sophie returned to the diner, exhausted and rattled. She'd helped someone in need. That was good. That was right. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just set something in motion that she didn't understand and couldn't control. That afternoon, Sophie picked up Emma from her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who watched her during Sophie's shifts. Emma chattered about kindergarten, about her friend Lucy, about the caterpillar they'd found on the playground. Sophie held her daughter close, breathing in her shampoo-scented hair, grateful for normalcy. They were eating dinner, mac and cheese, Emma's favorite, when Sophie's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Ms. Mitchell? This is Marcus Morrison, Jake's brother. I understand you helped him last night." The voice was deep, authoritative, controlled. "I did what anyone would do." "No, you did what very few people would do. You risked yourself for a stranger. That means something to us. I'd like to meet you if you're willing. Thank you in person, and discuss the situation." Sophie glanced at Emma, who was making patterns in her mac and cheese. "I don't want trouble, Mr. Morrison. I just want to live my life. I understand. And I promise, we're not here to bring trouble to you. The opposite, actually. But I'd feel better having this conversation face to face. Would tomorrow work? I can come to you." Against her better judgment, Sophie agreed. They set a time, 2 p.m., at the diner during her break. She hung up feeling uneasy, but also curious. What did "discuss the situation" mean? 03. Marcus Steele Morrison arrived exactly at 2 p.m. Sophie spotted him through the diner window, 6'3", built solid, late 40s, with a presence that made people instinctively step aside. His Diablo's vest was covered in patches that marked rank and years of membership. He wasn't alone. 2 other members flanked him, but they stayed outside by the bikes while Marcus entered. Sophie met him by the door. "Mr. Morrison? Call me Marcus." His handshake was firm but not aggressive. "Thanks for meeting me. Can we sit?" They took a booth in the back. Red glanced over, curious but not interfering. Sophie had told him she was meeting someone about a situation from last night, but hadn't elaborated. Red was ex-military. He understood operational security. "First thing," Marcus said, "Jake's gonna be fine. You probably saved his life. The cut was infected. Our doctor got him on antibiotics, stitched him up properly. He'll recover. I'm glad. Second thing, and this is important, the Iron Wolves know you helped him. They've got the diner under surveillance. Saw Jake's pickup leave. They know he was here." Sophie's blood ran cold. "What does that mean for me?" "It means you're in danger. The wolves don't forget. They'll want to know what Jake told you, what you know. And they're not gentle when they ask questions. I don't know anything. I just bandaged a wound and let him rest. Doesn't matter what you actually know. Matters what they think you know." Marcus leaned forward. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm being honest. You showed courage helping my brother. Now we're going to show courage protecting you." "I don't need protection." "Yeah, you do. And you're going to get it whether you want it or not. That's how this works. You helped one of ours. Now you're under our protection. It's done." Sophie felt like the floor was tilting. "I have a daughter, 5 years old. I can't have motorcycle gang drama in my life, which is exactly why you need protection. The wolves know about Emma. They know where you live, where she goes to school. I'm not saying this to terrorize you. I'm saying this because it's reality. But here's the thing. As long as you're under Diablo's protection, they won't touch you. They can't. It would start a war they can't win." "A war? Over me?" "Over principle. You protected one of ours. That makes you honorary family. And we protect family." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her security footage. Grainy, but clear. Sophie recognized the diner, recognized herself, recognized the moment the Iron Wolves questioned her, and she lied. "We pulled this from your parking lot camera. Jake showed me. You looked those men in the eye and lied without hesitation. You knew they were dangerous. You knew they could hurt you. You did it anyway. That's not nothing. That's the kind of loyalty and courage we respect." Sophie stared at the screen. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. We want to give you something. Safety. Peace of mind. Tomorrow morning, you're gonna see a lot of motorcycles outside this diner. Don't be alarmed. We're making a statement, letting the wolves and anyone else know that Sophie Mitchell is off limits, that this diner is neutral ground, that anyone who messes with you answers to us. How many motorcycles? Enough. Trust me, it'll be enough. Marcus stood to leave. One more thing. Jake told me you have integrity, that you didn't ask for money or favors. You just helped because it was right. That's rare. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. He placed a card on the table with a phone number. Day or night, you call, we come. That's a promise. After Marcus left, Sophie sat alone in the booth, staring at the card. Her life had been simple, predictable. Now it was something else entirely. She thought about Emma, about keeping her safe, about whether she'd made a terrible mistake or the only choice her conscience would allow. That evening, Sophie told Emma they were going to stay with Mrs. Chen for a few days. Like a sleepover, Sophie explained. Won't that be fun? Emma was delighted. Sophie was terrified. If Marcus was right, if the wolves really were watching her, then she needed Emma somewhere safe until what? She didn't know. Sophie barely slept that night. She kept thinking about Marcus's words. Tomorrow morning, you're going to see a lot of motorcycles. What did that mean? 10? 20? She had no frame of reference for motorcycle club dynamics, no understanding of what she'd stepped into. Her alarm went off at 10:30 p.m. for her Friday graveyard shift. She dressed, kissed Emma goodbye at Mrs. Chen's apartment, and drove to Red's diner through dark, empty streets. The highway was quiet. The diner parking lot was empty except for Red's old Ford. Normal. Everything looked normal. Sophie went through her shift on autopilot, brewing coffee, wiping tables, taking the occasional order from sleepy truckers. She kept watching the windows, waiting for iron wolves to show up, to confront her, to make good on whatever threats Marcus had implied. But nothing happened. The night passed quietly. At 6:30 a.m., Red arrived. At 7 a.m., Sophie's shift ended, and she headed toward her car in the pale morning light. That's when she heard it. Distant at first, like thunder rolling across the desert. But the sky was clear. The sound grew louder, closer, more defined. Not thunder. Engines. Dozens of engines, hundreds of engines. Sophie turned toward the highway and froze. From both directions, motorcycles appeared, an endless stream of leather and chrome and roaring power. They filled the highway, slowed, turned into the diner's parking lot. More kept coming, and more, and more. They parked in neat rows, engines cutting off one by one until the silence was almost as overwhelming as the noise had been. Sophie counted 20, 50, 100. She stopped counting. There had to be 300 motorcycles, maybe more. Men and women in leather vests. Not just Diablo's patches, but patches from other clubs too. Allied clubs, apparently, all here for one purpose. Marcus stepped forward from the crowd. Behind him, Jake, still pale but standing, raised a hand in greeting. The entire assembly of bikers stood silent, watching Sophie with expressions of respect and solidarity. Ms. Mitchell, Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot. The Diablo's MC and our brother clubs from across the Southwest want to formally acknowledge your courage and declare you under our permanent protection. Anyone who threatens you threatens us. Anyone who harms you answers to us. This diner is now neutral ground. You are now family. This is our vow. 300 voices rumbled in agreement. This is our vow. Sophie stood frozen, overwhelmed, trying to process the scene before her. 300 bikers. All here because she'd hidden a bleeding man and lied to his enemies. All here declaring her family. All here changing her life in ways she couldn't begin to understand. Red stepped out of the diner, took one look at the assembled motorcycles, and whistled low. Sophie, what in the hell did you do? I helped someone, Sophie whispered. I just helped someone. But as she watched 300 bikers stand vigil outside the diner where she'd worked for 8 years, Sophie realized she'd done more than help. She'd accidentally stepped into a world of loyalty, honor, and codes she didn't understand. And somehow, impossibly, she'd earned their respect. Now she just had to figure out what that meant, and whether it was a blessing or a curse. Or 4. News crews arrived within 2 hours. 300 motorcycles parked outside a roadside diner made irresistible footage. Sophie found herself thrust into spotlight as reporters asked questions she didn't know how to answer. Ms. Mitchell, why did you help a member of the Diablo's MC? He needed help, Sophie said simply, uncomfortable with cameras. That's all. Are you involved with the motorcycle club? No, I'm just a waitress who made a choice, Marcus stepped in, taking over with practiced ease. Sophie Mitchell showed extraordinary courage protecting one of our brothers from those who meant him harm. We're here to honor that courage and ensure her safety. This woman represents the best of what people can be: brave, compassionate, unwilling to look away when someone needs help. The story went viral. Waitress saves biker, gets protection from 300 club members. Footage of Sophie standing tiny before 300 motorcycles was shared millions of times. Some called her brave, some called her foolish, some called her a hero. Sophie just wanted normal back, but normal was gone. The Iron Wolves, seeing the massive show of force, backed off completely. They couldn't touch Sophie without triggering war with not just the Diablos, but half a dozen allied clubs. The evidence Jake had gathered, the USB drive with proof of their drug operation and police corruption, was turned over to the FBI. An investigation launched. Several officers arrested. The Wolf president went into hiding. What Sophie thought was simple compassion had accidentally dismantled a criminal enterprise and exposed corruption reaching high into local law enforcement. "I didn't mean for any of this," Sophie told Marcus a week later. "Best things are rarely planned," Marcus said. "You acted on instinct, good instinct, and now you've got family watching your back." Over following weeks, Sophie's life transformed. The Diablos maintained a presence at the diner. Not intrusive, just visible. 2 or 3 members were always nearby during her shifts. They didn't interfere with work, didn't make demands, just existed as quiet protection. Emma thought they were cool. "Mommy, why do the motorcycle people come here?" "They're friends," Sophie said. "They make sure we're safe." "Like superheroes?" Sophie smiled. "Something like that." Jake recovered fully and visited regularly. He and Sophie developed unlikely friendship. The biker and the waitress bonded by one desperate night. Jake told her about club life, about brotherhood, about why these men chose this path. They weren't criminals or thugs. They were men who'd found family outside traditional structures, who lived by codes of loyalty and honor. "We're not perfect," Jake admitted. "We've all made mistakes, but we take care of our own. And now that includes you." Red's Diner became famous. Bikers from across the country made pilgrimages to visit the place where Sophie hid Razor. Business tripled. Red hired 2 more waitresses to handle volume. He gave Sophie a substantial raise and made her assistant manager. "You've changed this place," Red told her. "Made it something special." But not everyone was happy. 3 months after the incident, Sophie received a threatening letter. No return address, crude handwriting. "You made enemies, protected the wrong people. We don't forget. Watch your back." She showed Marcus immediately. His face darkened. The Wolves are supposed to be done. Their operation collapsed. Most scattered. But maybe someone's still around holding a grudge. Should I be worried? No, because we're already handling it. 2 days later, the man who'd sent the letter, a former Iron Wolf who'd escaped arrest, was found by the Diablos. They didn't hurt him. They simply drove him to the FBI office and presented him with evidence of his involvement in the drug operation. He was arrested on outstanding warrants. The message was clear. You can't touch Sophie without consequences. Sophie wrestled with this. She didn't like people being hunted down because of her. But Marcus explained differently. This isn't revenge, it's justice. That man was part of the operation that nearly killed Jake, that corrupted police, that brought drugs into our community. He deserved consequences. We just made sure he did. 6 months after the rescue, the FBI's investigation concluded. 12 Iron Wolves were convicted. 4 police officers were fired and charged with corruption. The cartel connection was severed. The entire operation collapsed because Jake had gathered evidence and survived, because Sophie had hidden him. You changed everything, FBI agent Sarah Reeves told Sophie during follow-up. Without your intervention, Jake Morrison dies. The evidence dies with him, and a criminal enterprise continues operating. Your courage had ripple effects you probably can't comprehend. I just hid someone in a storage room, Sophie protested. You did more than that. You made a choice when most would have looked away. That matters. Stoffer Zo 5. A year after the incident, Sophie's life had found new normal. The constant presence of Diablo's members had become familiar, even comforting. She knew their names, their stories, their coffee orders. They knew about Emma, asked about her kindergarten graduation, brought birthday presents. They'd become, as Marcus promised, family. Emma turned 6. Sophie threw a party at their apartment, modest but filled with love. Emma's school friends came, Mrs. Chen came, Red came, and to Emma's delight, 10 Diablo's members showed up with presents and motorcycles they let the kids sit on while parked. Best birthday ever, Emma declared, wearing a tiny leather vest Marcus had custom made. It said Diablo's Princess on the back. Sophie cried when she saw it. Jake pulled Sophie aside during the party. You know what today is? Emma's birthday? Also the anniversary of the day you saved my life. I wanted to give you something. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. Sophie stared, speechless. Jake, I can't. You can, and you will. This is from the club. We pooled resources. It's not payment for what you did. That's priceless. It's support. For Emma's future, for college, or whatever she needs. Take it, please. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. $50,000. That was security. That was Emma's education funded. That was breathing room. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll let us take care of you the way you took care of me. Sophie hugged Jake tightly. Thank you. Thank you so much. That money changed things. Sophie opened a college fund for Emma. She paid off her car. She put money aside for emergencies. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't drowning financially. But the biggest change came from something unexpected. A journalist named Patricia Reynolds wrote a book about Sophie's story, The Waitress and the Warriors, how one act of courage changed everything. It detailed Sophie's decision to hide Jake, the massive show of support from the clubs, and the subsequent takedown of the criminal operation. The book became a bestseller. Sophie received a portion of proceeds, enough to quit working double shifts, to spend more time with Emma, to actually breathe. Patricia donated the rest to charities supporting children of incarcerated parents. Your story matters, Patricia told Sophie during a book signing at Red's Diner. It shows ordinary people can make extraordinary differences. That courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite fear. Sophie hadn't thought of herself as extraordinary. She'd just done what felt right. But looking around the diner, at the bikers who'd become friends, at Emma who was thriving, at Red whose business was booming, at her own transformed life, she realized maybe Patricia was right. Maybe small acts of courage did matter. The Iron Wolves were effectively disbanded. Most members had scattered or been arrested. But their former president, a man named Vince Reaper Callahan, remained at large. He'd fled when the investigation started, reportedly hiding in Mexico. Marcus kept Sophie updated, assuring her Callahan was monitored and posed no immediate threat. But threats have a way of materializing when you least expect them. It happened on a Tuesday night, 18 months after the original incident. Sophie was closing the diner, midnight, and she was last one there. Red had left at 11. The Diablo's rotation wouldn't arrive for night shift watch for another 30 minutes. Sophie was alone. She heard the door open behind her as she cashed out the register. Sorry, we're closed, she said without turning. I know. The voice was unfamiliar, cold, but this won't take long. Sophie turned. A man stood in the doorway, 50-ish, scarred face, Iron Wolf's vest worn and faded. She recognized him from photos Marcus had shown. Vince Callahan, the missing president, the one who'd gotten away. You cost me everything, Callahan said quietly, stepping inside and locking the door. My club, my operation, my life, all because you couldn't mind your own business. Sophie's hand moved slowly toward her phone, but Callahan pulled a gun. Don't. Her heart hammered. Stay calm. Buy time. The Diablos would arrive soon. I just helped someone who was hurt. That's all. That's all? Callahan's laugh was bitter. That all destroyed everything I built. Razor had evidence that brought down my entire enterprise. You kept him alive long enough to use it. You think that's nothing? It was the right thing to do. Right? Callahan moved closer, gun steady. What's right is people staying out of business that doesn't concern them. What's right is waitresses serving coffee and keeping quiet. You couldn't do that, so now I'm here to balance the scales. Killing me won't fix anything. Your club is gone. Your operation is done. The evidence is already with the FBI. You're a symbol, Callahan interrupted. The woman who stood up to us. The hero. If I let you live, I look weak. I can't have that. Sophie's mind raced. She needed to stall. So what's your plan? Shoot me and then what? Run again? The Diablos will find you. Maybe. But you'll still be dead. Callahan raised the gun, pointing at her chest. Sorry, Sophie. Nothing personal. Just business. Sophie closed her eyes, thinking of Emma, of how her daughter would grow up without a mother because Sophie had made one courageous choice. Was it worth it? Would she change anything? No, she wouldn't. Even facing death, she wouldn't change it. Jake deserved to live. That mattered more than her fear. The sound of motorcycles, multiple engines approaching fast, shattered the moment. Callahan cursed, moved toward Sophie, grabbed her arm roughly. "Insurance," he muttered, pressing the gun to her side. The diner door exploded inward. Marcus entered first, followed by 6 Diablo's members, all armed. They surrounded Callahan immediately. "Let her go, Vince," Marcus said calmly. "It can't get worse. You destroyed my life. I'm just returning the favor." "By killing an innocent woman?" "She's not innocent. She started this." "She saved someone's life," Marcus corrected. "That's not a crime. That's humanity." Sophie felt the gun press harder into her ribs. She met Marcus's eyes, saw calculation there. She shook her head slightly. "Don't risk it." But Jake stepped forward, hands raised. "Vince, remember when you pulled me out of that bar fight in Phoenix? 7 years ago. I was about to get killed, and you intervened. You saved my life." Callahan blinked, confused. "You did that because it was right," Jake continued. "Because we were brothers. Because that's the code. Somewhere you forgot that code. But it's not too late. Let Sophie go. Turn yourself in. Accept responsibility. Maybe you get 20 years instead of life. But if you pull that trigger, there's no coming back." 06. The diner was silent except for breathing and idling motorcycles outside. Sophie felt Callahan's grip tremble slightly, saw indecision in his eyes. He was a man who'd lost everything, facing the final choice that would define him forever. Slowly, Callahan lowered the gun. He released Sophie, who stumbled forward into Jake's arms. Callahan set the weapon on the counter, raised his hands. "I'm done." Marcus moved quickly, securing the gun, calling police. Within minutes, squad cars arrived. Callahan was arrested without resistance. He looked at Sophie as they led him away. "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." Sophie nodded. She couldn't find words. She'd come within seconds of death because she'd done something good. The unfairness was staggering. After police left, Marcus made Sophie sit. "You okay?" "I don't know." Sophie's hands shook. I really thought. "I know, but you're safe now." "Callahan's going away for a long time." Marcus pulled up a chair. "Sophie, I need to ask something. After tonight, if you want out, if you want us to back off, give you space, we'll do it. No hard feelings." Sophie looked around the diner, at Jake, whose life she'd saved, at the other Diablos who'd rushed here to protect her, at Marcus, who'd treated her with more respect than almost anyone. She thought about Emma's birthday party, the college fund, the friendships she'd formed, the family she'd gained. "No," Sophie said quietly. "I don't want out. All of this, it's scary sometimes, but it's also beautiful. You've shown me what loyalty looks like, what chosen family looks like. I'm not walking away from that." Marcus smiled. "Then we're not walking away from you." The story of Callahan's arrest made national news. Former gang leader arrested attempting to kill Waitress who exposed his crimes. Sophie gave one final interview, asked if she regretted her decision to hide Jake Morrison. "Not for a second," Sophie said. "I'd do it again tomorrow. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to survive. And sometimes surviving means helping each other, even when it's dangerous, especially when it's dangerous." Callahan was sentenced to 35 years. The remaining Iron Wolves were found and prosecuted. The criminal enterprise was fully dismantled. And Sophie Mitchell, waitress, single mother, accidental hero, became a symbol of courage in a world that desperately needed examples of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. 2 years after the rescue, Sophie stood outside Red's diner, now officially renamed Sophie's Place with Red's blessing, and watched as 50 Diablo's members gathered for the anniversary. They'd made it a tradition. Every year on this date, the club would meet at the diner to honor the moment Sophie chose courage over safety. Emma, now 7, wore her leather vest proudly and sat on Jake's motorcycle, pretending to ride. Sophie watched her daughter, happy, secure, loved, and felt overwhelming gratitude. Yes, her life had changed. Yes, she'd faced danger. But she'd also gained family, purpose, and proof that doing the right thing mattered. Jake approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thinking deep thoughts? Thinking about choices, about how one decision can change everything. "Any regrets?" Sophie smiled. "Not one." Marcus called everyone to attention. The assembled bikers quieted. 2 years ago, Sophie Mitchell made a choice. She chose humanity over fear. She chose to protect someone who needed help, even though it put her at risk. Because of that choice, Jake is alive. Evidence reached the FBI. Criminals faced justice, and all of us learned what real courage looks like. He raised his coffee cup. To Sophie, to choosing right over easy, to the woman who stopped a war by refusing to let a wounded man die in her diner. 50 voices echoed. To Sophie. Sophie felt tears on her cheeks. Good tears. Grateful tears. She'd been so afraid that night when Jake stumbled through her door. Afraid of consequences, afraid of danger, afraid of changing her safe, predictable life. But fear was a poor guide. Compassion was better. And standing here 2 years later, surrounded by people who'd become family, running a thriving diner, watching her daughter grow up secure and loved, Sophie knew she'd made the right choice. 3 years after the rescue, Sophie met Daniel Reeves, an EMT who stopped at the diner regularly. He knew her story, admired her courage, and slowly, carefully, they fell in love. Daniel understood her life, understood the Diablo's presence, understood that Sophie came with a protective detail and complicated history. I wouldn't change any of it, Daniel told her on their first date. Everything you've been through made you who you are, and who you are is pretty amazing. They married the following year. Emma was flower girl. Marcus walked Sophie down the aisle. 50 Diablo's members formed an honor guard outside the small church. It was unconventional. It was perfect. Sophie Mitchell, now Sophie Reeves, continued working at the diner she'd renamed. She raised Emma with Daniel's help. She maintained friendship with the Diablos, who remained a constant protective presence. She lived the life she'd built from one moment of courage, one decision to help someone in need. And every time she told her story, to journalists, to students, to anyone who asked, she ended with the same words. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to look away when another human being needed help. That's all. And if I can do it, anyone can. The world changes when we choose compassion. When we choose to help instead of hide. When we choose courage over fear. It's really that simple. And it's really that hard. But it's always, always worth it. Years later, when Emma asked her mother what the most important thing she'd learned in life was, Sophie's answer came easily. That family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who protects you, who honors your courage and stands beside you when things get hard. I learned that from a bleeding man who stumbled into my diner asking for help, and from the 300 bikers who showed up the next day to declare me family. Emma absorbed this, then asked, so if someone needs help, we help them? Always, Sophie said firmly. Even if it's scary, even if it's dangerous, even if it changes everything, we help. That's what family does. And in that simple exchange, Sophie passed forward the most important lesson of her life, that courage is contagious, that compassion creates ripples, and that one person choosing to do the right thing can change the world in ways they'll never fully comprehend. The end.